Hey, welcome to Your Full Crew. Today we're going to be talking about sea tech, and we've got some interesting topics to talk about today, including some autonomy testing trials, both in shipping vessels and underwater vehicles, and more topical for what's going on in the world today in geopolitics. We're going to be discussing U.S. Navy dealing with issues in the Strait of Hormuz. We've got some great guests to talk about these topics today. I'm going to start with Alan. So, Alan, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're here.
Hi, I'm Alan Weigel. I'm an attorney with Blank Rome in New York, and primarily my practice is focused on the maritime industry. I'm a Naval Academy graduate, spent 24 years in the Navy, and have been practicing maritime law ever since. Essentially, I do ships, the intersection of ships and some legal issue.
Sort of underselling it. I would suggest that I don't know if it's come out yet, but you should definitely check out Alan, who was on Law Tech Connect panel this year at Dawn's show. We've also had him on before, and he's one of my favorite people. I always learn something great and knowledgeable about shipping when he's on. We've got a first-time guest here, Alberto. So, Alberto, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, thanks for having me. My name is Alberto Lopez. I am the CEO of Sunfish, and at Sunfish we build and deploy autonomous underwater vehicles that can access really the most complex underwater spaces and environments. And my last 20 years has been really focused on taking things that have been technologically developed in R&D and deep tech, and then bringing them out commercially. Have experience working in NASA programs and some Department of Defense programs, and then for the last 10 years, close to 10 years, I've been working with Sunfish to bring this technology to commercialization and adoption.
And certainly excited to hear a little bit more about that technology in the article. It seems that there's a lot of advancements in the category. So last but not least, we've got Victor. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Greetings from sunny London. So my name is Victor Meyer. I'm a principal and founder at the Battersea Group. Started off my career in naval special warfare, so I spent 22 years as a Navy SEAL, including some time at U.S. Special Operations Command as PEO Maritime, so responsible for undersea and surface systems for Navy SOF. I spent a 17-year stint in investment banking in London at Deutsche Bank, and for the last couple of years have been involved in the autonomous space. Currently, I'm the head of sales at MarTac Systems, which is one of the premier manufacturers of USVs in the space, and we indeed have a couple of boats operational in the Baltic. So this topic, Alberto, is quite interesting, that you'll address in a second, and as well in the Philippines, in the Philippine littoral.
Yeah, well, you definitely get my vote for picking the most interesting topic today. I'm sure there'll be a lot of discussion, but all of our articles are great. So we're going to start with Alan's first, because this is significant, right? So ships can be big, and autonomous ships represent a lot of value that the world could definitely use in terms of making this complicated process even easier. But we have to work out some details, don't we? So, Alan, tell us a little bit about what's going on in autonomous shipping.
Yeah, so this article is, as you said, Michael, significant because for a couple of reasons. First of all, it involves the Maritime Port Authority of Singapore, Nippon Yusen Kabukishi, which is normally called NYK. It's the largest Japanese shipping company in the world. And they are going to join in an effort to test maritime autonomous surface ships, also known as MASS, in Singapore, starting in this year. This is significant because, first of all, Japan has been at the forefront of testing autonomous technology for large surface ships, but they've done so usually mostly in their territorial waters. So this is they're going much further afield with this. They've chosen, of all places, Singapore. That's significant for two reasons. One, Singapore Straits are the busiest shipping lanes in the world. Upwards of 2,000 ships a day transit. So if you can demonstrate that your autonomous technology can keep you from going bump in the night in a place where there's 2,000 ships a day transiting, you've probably met that standard. This is really going to be a stress test, is what I'm saying, for autonomous technology. At the same time, Singapore, the shipping companies who are located in Singapore are very tech savvy. They're very tech forward and have adopted all kinds of technology. The Maritime Port Authority of Singapore probably has lagged somewhat behind that. And so it's very interesting that they are now embracing testing of autonomous technology in their home waters. The other thing I'll have to say about Maritime Port Authority, MPA, is they've been very strict in the past in enforcing their manning regulations, how many people are required to be on a ship in their waters. So the fact that the NYK and the MPA are going to agree eventually, I would think that you can operate ships autonomously with less crewmen on than currently required by international regulations would be another significant development, if that's the end, which I assume is the end goal of these trials.
So it looks like this is testing in a, like you said, a much more complicated environment, and also it's so as a Japanese company, I would assume it's easier for them to use work with the Japanese government and Port Authority for any initial tests there, right? So what level of what do you actually expect to happen during the testing? Like, what is the intended results and the result of that results? Like, what happens next if they're able to prove this test?
Well, that's an interesting question, because they haven't really said at what level, where they're going to start, or really where their end goal is. But if you just take what NYK and the other Japanese entities have done in Japan, and assume that that is the end goal to be reached in Singapore as well. For example, the Japanese have taken a ship, loaded it with containers, sailed it in Japan across from one island to another, and unloaded it, and it did it all without a crew on board. So it's a fairly large feeder vessel, as they call it, type of ship. I would assume that's eventually it would be what we call degree 5 of autonomy. So you would expect maybe to completely crewless, completely operated without any kind of control from ashore. I guess that would be the ultimate goal. I would assume that their beginning steps would be to demonstrate that the autonomous technology can navigate from one point to another point in the Singapore Strait without any intervention by the crew, and eventually then do that testing completely autonomous.
Well, I look forward to seeing the results for sure. Alberto, what are your thoughts on this?
I think autonomy is here and it's coming really quickly. I think it's more of an adoption discussion, and so I'm curious to learn more about how with the speed of the technology, and I think there's a lot of demonstrations about surface vessels being autonomously controlled, and so how do you move that to the shipping industry, and then large move that at scale for large shipping daily. But I see a hurdle here, not on the technology side. That's definitely something that needs to be worked on. But it's really on the kind of policy and the politics, right? So what I guess, and I'm not super familiar with all the regulations for shipping and the international treaties and how that works, but I'm curious to learn what are the real barriers to the maritime regulations that are kind of holding back autonomy? Because I think the technology is here. I mean, there's been plenty of showcasing of surface vehicles that have gone from, from San Diego all the way to Hawaii and can definitely go beyond. But then how do you, infuse that technology in the current, regulatory space, and what needs to change for adoption to happen, right? Yeah, so that's just kind of a question I have on these technology trials, and how do you, when you adopt, how do you scale that and so that it becomes kind of the norm in the shipping industry?
So, Alan, any thoughts on that?
Alan?
Yeah, so I think we'll just there's a lot of regulations, international regulations that all imply in one form or another that there's a human on board the ship.
That's right.
And that is something that the International Maritime Organization is currently grappling with. They're in the process of developing what they call a mass code, and say, well, here's how we should interpret these regulations that say there's supposed to be a person here at some doing some duty. I think that they're, just to use one example, and the one that comes to my mind most frequently when you talk about autonomy and driving ships autonomously, is that we have something called the International Regulations for the Prevention of Collisions between ships. And those international collision regulations assume really that you have two ships that meet each other in some and in some fashion. One has to maneuver to avoid the other. And autonomy so far is pretty good at saying, all right, I see that ship and I got it in my brain, in my artificial intelligence brain, I know what I'm supposed to do. What I don't know is how they're going to work this out. When you're surrounded by 2,000 ships, not all of them will always comply with those collision regulations. So I think that's why I've said earlier that this is really going to be a stress test. But it's also the area that the IMO is really looking at very heavily, is like, well, how do we adopt the collision regulations to take into account the fact that we may not have a human in the loop? I think the first step is going to be probably no human on board the ship, but still controlled from ashore, before we go to full autonomy, where the artificial intelligence takes over and just drives the ship from one port to another.
Yeah, similar issues arise when you're talking about autonomous, robotaxis, right? A lot of people will make the claim that it's an easier environment if every car on the road was autonomous. Then how things would be deconflicting, right? Honestly, that might be true, but its statistical significance might be overstated. TBH.
Yeah,
so Victor,
oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was
yeah. Well, the difference between autonomous robocars and autonomous ships is that at least everybody's going the same direction if you're in the same travel lane, whereas there's no lanes painted on the ocean, so you really don't know exactly where that. I mean, you have a better idea where the other cars are going than you have where the other ships are going.
Yeah, but still limited to only two-dimensional avoidance, right?
Right.
So not the benefit of aviation where there's 3D. Victor, what were your thoughts?
It's a very interesting topic. I think I've got two observations. So as a former chief engineer, whenever you on a destroyer, before I became a SEAL, whenever you scale engineering systems, you introduce complexity. And so on the destroyer, there was always something that was breaking, a shaft seal, a water pump. We had to change oil filters all the time. So as we scale these into larger and larger ships, I'm always interested and concerned about the engineering implications of that. However, look, Saronic, a competitor of ours, has just bought Port Alpha, the shipyard in Galveston, Texas. So they wouldn't be doing that if it wasn't achievable. Second, I think that warfare is trending rather away from larger systems, so unaffordable exquisiteness, and towards affordable scalable mass. I'm reminded of Stalin's, I think we're returning to the Second World War and tank warfare, where And Stalin's adage, quantity has its own quality. And I think that mass will carry the day, affordable mass will carry the day over unaffordable exquisiteness.
Alan, any final
Yeah,
thoughts?
Irish, it's interesting you raised the question about engineering. We have kind of a similar background in that I was a chief engineer on a submarine at one point, and I understand the reliability issues. That's probably 50% of my caseload is got to do with accidents that happen because of some engineering casualty. I would say that that's probably one of the areas that I think is the least developed. Figuring out how you're going to have a fairly simple, robust, reliable engineering plant is probably, it may be at this point, the biggest hurdle to achieving full autonomy on commercial ships. And in terms of the scale, I think we're still thinking the fact that you could have 10 ships with 100 containers on them each, or you could have one ship with 1,000 containers on them each. And I don't think we've got really. I think the scale issue is more a matter of fuel consumption, and we're gonna have to see how all the new energy type of things will affect that economy of scale as we go forward.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. Also, if you're the shipping company, right, you're looking at the amount that you get out of a single journey. So there's a reason the ship's forms have kind of over time, like you see those flat bottoms versus older ships. Even that development over time is a consequence of stacking more and more and more on top of the ship. So I'm sure autonomy will actually redefine the form factor of the ships, as well as whether or not smaller journeys are feasible. They might even go in the other direction, right?
Yeah, I don't. It remains to be seen. Again, like I said, crew cost and energy cost are the two big drivers of why ships have gotten bigger and bigger to make fewer voyages, essentially. Autonomy is obviously going to change that crew calculation, but it still doesn't change the fact that you have to burn so many metric tons of oil to get across the Atlantic or Pacific.
All right. Any final thoughts, Alan, before we move on to the next article?
No, I think we've got this covered here so far.
Yeah, really interesting, though. Excited to see what the test results are. So let's move on to another test that's happening. This one is underwater for pipeline and cable security. So, Alberto, this is your article. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. Well, I choose this article because it highlights kind of some really important and frankly rare applications of robotics in a critical area. Specifically on this one is mine countermeasures and protection of subsea cables. And I think this is a massive opportunity just in the underwater space, because there's just so much undersea infrastructure currently built. It was traditional, offshore oil and gas, but today it's all about data, right? The world is using more data. It's exponentially going to be using more data, and a lot of that data gets transferred in these probably close to 900,000 miles of subsea cable in the world. So if you have these, I'm sure Alan and Victor know this classical example of undersea mine countermeasures. There's kind of a three-step process. You search for it, you locate it, and then you deactivate it. And it's a slow process that underwater autonomous systems have a huge opportunity to shorten, so that you can react faster. And then you currently do it with multiple systems, and the opportunity of just doing it with one system is just fantastic. And I've never seen actually a publicly shown video of it being a remotely operated vehicle being put in the water and then detonating and doing a test. Most of the companies and most of the public just has kind of generated videos of showing the concept, but it's really interesting that they actually showed the video out of it. You know, you can YouTube it and you can see it in real life. And I think the ultimate goal is to have this exercise being done just by one platform, as I said, but that's a huge technological lift, and it shows like where we are today, demonstrating with an operator-controlled underwater vehicle to, you know, and then the technological lift of having all this completely automated and autonomously done. But undersea, I just maybe have that discussion of the magnitude of difficulty of doing that. You know, we talked about surface vehicles, and well, there, you know, you have the luxury of GPS, you have the luxury of people looking at the ships and having great visibility. One thing that Alan mentioned, having an operator in the loop, you know, you can implement those things called supervised autonomy to bring value, economic value quickly. Undersea, you know, there's whole harsh environment, right? No GPS, strong currents, salt water makes everything corrosive and harder and more expensive. And then, you know, you might have a shark here or there, just throw it in the mix, right? But yeah, so these are the challenges that we face in Sunfish, and maybe that's not super obvious in underwater autonomy, but to me, this article shows at least, you know, publicly, hey, where are we at on identifying, you know, things undersea? And we have a method now that we can deactivate it, but the process is still huge, right? You're still not automating and making this really efficient. And so it was kind of, you know, you look at it and you look at the state of autonomous drones above, you know, above land, and then you look at the state of autonomous underwater vehicles, and there's a huge lag, but it's because of the harsh environment. It's really difficult to do. But I think this is a really great step in the right direction. You know, we're starting to use machines and at least operator-controlled robots to address this huge challenge. You know, the subsea cable is huge. It's going to be a huge challenge, and so it just adds to the threat of also the oil and gas lines that are undersea that you can't really see, and it's hard to assess, because what you can't see, you can't really do anything about.
Yeah, I mean, just reading the summary of all the things that they're achieving here and attempting to achieve, like, this is pretty complex in terms of operational complexity, right?
It is really complex. So you know, you have to kind of patrol the area, and it gets really complex if these type of threats and infrastructure is really deep. You could do surveys and look for these threats with a boat, but then if it's really deep, you can't get the resolution to identify. So then you need another vehicle to go and do the searching, and then once you find kind of targets, then you send another mission to then locate it and know exactly where it is, and
by then a lot of time has happened.
And a lot of time, and then you got to go and send some. Well, it used to be folks, right? It used to be highly skilled divers to deactivate. Things are, you know, what these autonomous systems, in my mind, what they bring to the table in the undersea space is that they make it safer, right? You no longer need humans deactivating these munitions. Things are moving forward with robots with arms, at least operated by a person at a distance. They make it faster, right? So we're trying to bring those 3 steps, you know, shorter, and cheaper, right? Anything that results in 3 missions that can be reduced to 1 would be huge. We're not at the 1 yet. We're still at the 3. But, you know, autonomy is definite. Underwater autonomy is definitely moving towards achieving that.
Great. Victor, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, Michael. I mean, I think it's tough to overstate the importance of our undersea infrastructure. One only has to look at the Baltic and the two gas pipelines that were destroyed by a as yet unknown actor to fully understand that. And Europe was on its knees. Gas prices tripled. And people often underestimate just how independent financial services is on these cables. Now, there's huge amounts of redundancy, but a determined actor could cause serious disruption. And we've seen, for example, the Philippines almost cut off because their fiber optic network was severed in 3 places by an undersea earthquake. So this vulnerability is critical to be it's critical to address that for the global economy. And second, having had some experience as Alan has as well, obviously, for example, the SEAL delivery the advanced SEAL delivery system, and the dry combat submersible, which replaced it, which are the dry submersibles for the SEALs. There really is no place left to hide. And so the U.S. Navy and SOF in particular needs to get on board with developing a whole new suite of UUVs, because in non-permissive environments, the manned systems are just denied. It's just too dangerous and too risky to go into these places.
Yeah, and I know some people believe that the internet just kind of leaps over from country to country through air, but these cables are extremely significant, as you said, for all types of communications, information, and otherwise. And then also on the energy front, this is not to be underestimated. I think there's also probably a lead-in somewhere to your later article, maybe if not today, but potentially if we're talking about underwater mining or something, or deployment of mines in combat zones.
Just a real world example. I mean, Alberto is spot on. It really is a cat and mouse game right now. I mean, we've got
Red Queen scenario, right?
In the Baltic, there are bad actors we've got boats on ISR missions in the Baltic right now with NATO, and we're detecting and prosecuting bad actors, every month, and detaining them.
I think I heard about anchor dragging, things like that too.
Chinese vessel was apprehended, so it's just unbelievably important.
Yeah, absolutely. Really exciting information. Alberto, Alan, what is your thoughts on this?
Well, I thought something that Alberto mentioned is significant, and that's the fact that this is the environment where this testing is taking place, and where these trials are going, or these systems are going to be deployed, is probably some of the harshest undersea environment in the world. The North Sea is known for being a terribly difficult place to operate. Put aside the saltwater issue, the currents in the weather in the North Sea is horrific, and the fact that you can do this autonomously underwater without having to put people at risk just from the weather and the currents is significant. Also note that it's interesting that this technology is going to be used for sort of a dual purpose. Obviously, there's the immediate issue of the sabotage threats to undersea infrastructure is very important, but there's been a perennial historical issue of unexploded ordnance in the North Sea. I think it was the first North Sea mine barrage was World War I, and I think probably most of the 90% of those mines have never been removed. So it's a perennial problem. You always hear about in the news, especially in the UK, about someone finding a mine on the beach or unexploded ordnance somewhere that's become a threat. So the fact that you can use this technology for a real world, real time critical issue today, and that when it's not needed for that purpose, that you're out there solving this problem that's plagued the North Sea maritime countries for 110 years, I think is a really good development.
That's so true. Even long after conflicts have resolved, you're still kind of left with these vestigial dangerous devices embedded in environments. And anything we could do to kind of automate that process and take humans out of the loop to reduce risk and ultimately reclaim these environments for human use is super important. So any final thoughts, Alberto, before we move on to the next article?
Yeah, so in terms of kind of where we are today in the state of technology being deployed undersea, you can see it in the article. We are at remotely operated vehicles successfully being able to remove threats underwater. Like Alan said, these mines that have been around since the Second World War. And like Victor said, just protecting subsea cables all around and just that complexity. But I'm super excited, at kind of what comes next. At these systems becoming more and more intelligent. The just AI, the adoption of AI, just the adoption of AI. AI has been around for a while, and at least we've been using it since 10 years ago. In our robot, but just today it has been mainstreamed, and I think the adoption of it will make these systems smarter and making this multifaceted problem into just a one solution, streamlined mission. So, but that's all. Thanks for the great discussion.
Yeah, I just want to take a note or see if we could add some clarification to the audience, because I feel like the word AI is getting even more convoluted as the days go by. What we're talking about is a specific implementation, kind of like computer vision, machine learning. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. So
like it's not. They're not talking to ChatGPT, the robot.
They're not talking to ChatGPT. So there's AI has been thrown around differently, right? When we talk autonomy, what level of autonomy are you talking about? So when we use AI, we use like the physical AI on robotics. Can the robot learn from the sensors and data that it's gathering and then make decisions, right? To do the next step, right? So I think that is artificial intelligence. The machine is using what it has just learned to make the next step. And so for this case on subsea cables, can you send a system in? Can it search? Can it, with using that data, can then it make a decision to intervene after that, all in one mission? That would be just a phenomenal technological leap. I think we'll get there. We're not there. We're still using humans in the loop. It's tough to do supervised autonomy underwater. But that when I clarify AI, I am talking about systems that can learn real time and then act based on that learning.
Awesome. Thank you for the extra clarity on that point. I want to take a brief moment to thank our sponsors, which makes this show possible. So we've got returning Carousel, Quantum Systems, Flyability, and Aiken. A lot of these sponsors have been with us for a long time, so we thank them for their continued support. But we'd also like to thank Flyability for joining us this year. And let's move on to the next article. And I think our first preceding articles will help actually us understand this conceptually even more. Victor, thank you for bringing this up. Extremely relevant to what's going on in the world of geopolitics. So tell us about your article and what we need to know about it.
Thanks, Michael. I've spent most of my Navy career in the Arabian Gulf, so it's kind of a subject near and dear to my heart. So it seemed natural to sort of write about it and then to leverage it for this session. I'm a huge fan of the counterfactuals, and I was reading an article earlier in the week by Matt Meeks, who's kind of a thought leader in this space. And it was like, what would he was talking about? What would have to be true for the U.S. Department of Defense to fully adapt scaled autonomy? They've been particularly slow in the USV space. And so I thought to myself, the old Donald Rumsfeld quote came back, you go to the war with the army that you've got. But I think, and I'll be deliberately provocative here, I really do think that the U.S. Navy has been a bit asleep at the switch here, particularly in Fifth Fleet and in CENTCOM. So if I would ask that question, what would you go to war with if you had to? The U.S. Navy should be owning seabed to space with autonomous vehicles because the technology is out there and the technology is deployed. The U.S. Department of Defense and the Navy in particular has decided not to adapt it, and certainly not to adapt it at scale. And the proof of concepts that they've adopted have not been particularly successful. So those players, in the space that are succeeding in like Havoc and Kraken or MarTac are three of the probably best examples, are sort of tarred with the same brush because the technology is there. But what's even more worrying is the fact that there's a complete disconnect between the Office of Secretary of Defense requirements and the Navy. The Navy is the OSD is pointing to the Navy and said, I don't have a requirement. I spoke with a very senior member of OSD that said, well, the Navy hasn't given us a requirement. And the Navy is begging for it. Sam Paparo in Indo-PACOM and Hellscape is the most obvious example. Because when you look at the requirement, the deterrence, keeping the Iranian Tariq-class submarines and their mini-subs bottled up in port so they can't deploy mines, keeping the swarming vessels in port so they can't harass, and if they do venture out, having autonomous swarming because they don't have it. And I'll take an autonomous swarming boat any day over a manned boat just because the autonomous boats are 3 or 4 times faster. And they'll take a 9G turn, whereas that's clearly impossible with a manned vessel. So it creates a whole you foreclose early on in the conflict a lot of options that the enemy would have, and all of this could have been done and should have been done beforehand. So it really is time for the U.S. Department of Defense to get their skates on because the technology is there. It's already deployed. It's in service with partner navies, and it's honestly it's been inexcusable.
There's a couple points I want to seize on. I think I'll deal with the less controversial one first. You had mentioned the autonomous swarms being able to basically do pivots that are a manned vehicle or crewed vehicle would be unable to do. I often show people like videos of RC helicopter pilots doing maneuvers that you'd never see an actual helicopter do, just to understand the increased capability that when you take the pilot who has to respond to G-force or any force of movement at all out of the loop, how much you've now got a 3D pointer that can do a lot of damage, right? It doesn't have the restraints. So I think I just wanted to bring some extra detail to that. On the second thing, talking about U.S. Navy or even just the Department of Defense being behind on autonomous technological developments, I would like to pose the question, what do you think the major causes of this are? Is it something like just cost function with current defense providers or manufacturers? Is it literally just bad habit of developing technology in one way and now the world has moved into a different realm, or is it just pure politics that's holding things back? And don't feel like you have to choose one of them. Figure out how you want to break that up if you so choose.
Let me answer the question this way, Michael. So I'm always looking for what does good look like, and then comparing it to what the U.S. Navy does. So I was with a NATO SOF force this week, and I sort of asked our head of innovation. I said, look, describe for me your requirements process. And he said, well, the new generation and the way technology is consumed by the new generation is completely different. You can't just like write the requirement down, go off, build me this. It's like, let me play around with this. Let me incorporate it into my ConOps. If it's got utility, I'll use it. If it doesn't, I'll find something else. It's that sort of in situ development of a combat capability that's required, and that doesn't really exist to the extent that our NATO nations and other partner nations are are doing it. And I don't think I think to a certain extent they can't money whip the problem the way the U.S. can.
Yes. Yeah, as clearly seen in Ukraine with the way that drones have developed, right? Any final comments on that before I bring the other guests in?
No, that's I guess the only thing I would say is I'm fond of Russians, obviously. I mean, I'm fond of Russian philosophers and writers, and I'm reminded of Trotsky's statement. I would say to U.S. Navy leadership, you may not be interested in USVs, but USVs are interested in you. We lost 3 F/A-18s to USVs, to Houthi USVs. 2 of them we shot down, and 1 of them rolled off the flight deck when we were moving. That's a cool 750 million. A lot of capability in the USV world for 750 million. Nobody batted it.
Yeah, people are. I mean, I am not a military expert. I've never served, but I mean, I do know a little bit about math and the cost functions, the asymmetrical advantage of throwing a cheap thing that gets the job done and has these newer capabilities, even if it comes off the shelf. Compare that to the bid process, the build process, and the deployment, and how many thousands of dollars by comparison. And you don't have to have military experience to know that this is a dangerous equation where the gap needs to be kind of shortened. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Victor raises a couple of very good points, and that the one that struck me the most, though, is that the U.S. Navy has lost its ability to do experimentation. We used to be very good at that. We used to be very good at taking something that might be good enough and sending it out, testing it, and say, all right, let's try something different. I mean, we are gotten to the point where we build what one of my friends who is a commentator says, we build the Tiffany Navy. And yeah, and we can't figure out how to take, and we've got a USV operational squadron in San Diego that's supposed to be doing this, but they're really just taking some very high-end technology and trying to test it rather than take something that's good enough, deploy it, figure out what needs to be changed on it. We just don't have a very good history of doing that anymore.
Is that like a change that's happened in recent history? Like, or is there like a breaking point where, like, because didn't the Army and Navy and Air Force manufacture a little bit more internally so that they could do more rapid testing? And now it's really kind of all in the contractor's hands?
Yeah, well, we changed over the years. I'm not sure I'm able to point to a point in time and say, yeah, that's when everything changed. It's just over the years, our process, our procurement process in the military has just become more and more difficult. And because of that, there's so many requirements. There's no one there who just free things up and say, take that, go to sea with it, test it, come back, and we'll put some different on it if it doesn't work. We started doing that in some areas. It's called in combat systems using commercial off-the-shelf technology is what it's called, but it's such a small area. We really need to take what we've learned in how to do commercial off-the-shelf technology or COTS and scale that up to something like a USV and figure out how we can use those ideas and develop a USV for quickly, like we've been able to do some other areas.
Yeah, I had a conversation with somebody at a hackathon once, and they I don't want to drag the organization into it, so I'll remove the name for now. But they had mentioned that it's that gap between COTS and actual production ready military grade gear is vast, right? You don't have the production capacity, but you also, without winning the bids, you can't move towards there. And it's definitely a gap that needs to be resolved if large nations are going to be able to compete with, honestly, on the ground innovation. Alberto, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I have a lot of thoughts.
Okay.
I mean, you're talking to me who has who runs a small company that has been trying to provide its technology to the Navy for the last since we've been in business for the last 6 years. So we're really we're a startup, right? But we do have commercial business that in the early days, it's just a long cycle with the Navy, huge, tough market. And our early commercial customers, it was that when we had something good enough, like Alan said, we put it in front of the customer. And honestly, a lot of the times that we put our submersible vehicle doing inspections of critical infrastructure, the results weren't like fantastic, right? They were embarrassed, but the customer did see the long-term view on it, and we did make it better. We did make it more reliable, and we ultimately prioritize the satisfaction of that customer, and now we have repeating customers. And we just have been not able to start that cycle with the Navy. And it has to do, I think, with the procurement right now. It's really the procurement of it. The Navy has started to do some marketing inroads, like they have these programs like the DIU, Naval X, Ensign. There's a host of offices that are doing their work in putting our technology in front of the Navy to learn about it, to see what its capabilities. But then it holds a standstill, right? So we had a huge opportunity. For example, last year we had a Navy customer interested, and we fit the bill, but then it all collapsed on the procurement because there's just so many steps for a small company to do, and then there's all these requirements just on the procurement side. So I'm a huge fan of what Alan said about it. Just get something good enough there, and then let's figure out how to get this into making a benefit and mission capable system in the future.
It seems like everybody's pretty much on the same page that there definitely needs to be some push in the procurement process. Something is amiss if we're not getting the results for the dollars, right? But I've also seen this like turn into like reverse toxicity or attacking the people that are helping. There was a very popular post on LinkedIn recently that went after the DIU, and when I saw it, my first thought was like, yeah, but who else is helping to change the process, right? So I think I don't think anybody is specifically at fault, but the more we communicate that there's issues in the process and point out the needs, the quicker that these issues can be resolved. And to bring it back to kind of what's currently going on, and I'll put this to Victor. How do you think what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz, where the vulnerabilities are, and how we may need to address those vulnerabilities?
It's good news, bad news, Michael. I think fortunately and unfortunately, we will likely have dodged a bullet here, and so therefore we will not have tested the Navy the way they need to be tested. Now, Brad Cooper's a very capable leader, the new CENTCOM commander. So I know he gets it, and he will not delay in getting the capability there that's required. And it doesn't even have to be a MarTac boat. It just needs to be a capable USV, and there are others in the market. But unfortunately, that means that we will potentially not get the capability out to Taiwan, and Straits of in the South China Sea, where low cost deterrence needs to be deployed quickly. I'm a huge believer in the Davidson window. The alternative to not believing in the Davidson window, when you do the risk reward, is just clearly disproportionate.
Well, thank you everybody for your contributions, and Victor for that final assessment on what's going on. So there is a sense of urgency. The world is a lot more complicated than it was when I was growing up. And I think everybody has noticed that finally. Hopefully that will bring people to action to build deterrence and defense. To prevent conflict or mitigate conflict once it's broken out. So thank you again, Alan, Alberto, and Victor for participating. Thank you to the audience for watching. I don't even think I checked the chat today. We got K Cruz. Actually, we got a little time, so let's see if somebody can answer K's question. What's your thought on ocean aero testing in the Arctic Circle with its above-below autonomous system, or the overwhelming ramp up of China deep sea mining and warfare ROVs? Anybody want to take that one?
I'll take the Chinese question, and just since this is about new developments, about a month ago, maybe a little bit more than a month ago, the Chinese announced that they had just developed a brand new dual purpose USB UUV. Basically, this is a device that will travel on the surface at up to 65 knots and then submerge up to 30 days, maybe 60 days at a time. They are advertising this as a meteorological oceanographic research platform, where you will go out into the middle of a typhoon and submerge, take measurements, submerge in the middle of a typhoon, etc. But obviously, you can see that's really probably not really what they're going to use it for. It's clearly got a military development, a military capability.
Anybody else want to add anything to K's question?
I'm familiar with ocean aero, and I think it goes back to what a little bit about what I talked about in my article, that you're really trying to get these missions as fast, cheap, and safe as possible. The Arctic is a huge challenge. Talk about underwater in the Arctic. You have underwater, really cold, harsh environments. But it's a critical. It's not only like of scientific importance, right? It's also a contended environment. So I think having a presence of autonomous systems, persistent, and so that we know what's going on both above and below sea it's huge, right? If you have the information and you know what's going on all the time, then everybody can make better decisions geopolitically and avoid conflict and things like, and also inform for scientific purposes. So I think we got a great tech. Then the challenge is, how do you do the deep stuff, below 1,000 meters? I think I don't think you can do two systems in one that can do, deep and above, but maybe we'll get there shortly.
Awesome. Thank you, Kay, again for always tuning in. And you do often have some of the best questions, so really appreciate that last one. I just want to go around the circle and have everybody tell us where they're going to be in the near future, or where people can find them online. Starting with Alan.
So you can, if you're old school, you can go to our website, blankrome.com, or you can contact me via LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn.
Great. Victor?
MarTac Systems, or I'm available on LinkedIn as well.
And Alberto.
You can contact Sunfish at explore@sunfish.ai, and I'm on LinkedIn, and at least in the short term, we'll be at the Oceans Conference in Chicago this fall.
All right, and I just wanted to thank our sponsors one more time. That's Flyability Quantum Systems, Aiken and Karasoff. You make this show possible. And one last thank you to the audience for tuning in today. Again, this will be right here on the same YouTube link if you want to review it afterwards. Lots of great information today. Really good show. And I guess that's it. Oh, yeah, actually, Dawn has a guest from Defense Systems on tomorrow, or Defense Solutions on tomorrow. So go check that out. And that's it. We are out here.